Confidence is just a skill that you cultivate, you develop it the same way you would develop a skill to solve a quadratic equation or conjugate a verb in Spanish. You practice it. And if you practice it, you get better at it. The misconception is that, oh, I just don't have any, there's nothing I can do about it. That's not the case. If you're thinking that way, well, then you're just giving yourself an easy out.
To the You Can Too podcast. On today's show, we have an expert in the psychology of human performance who consults to individuals and organizations seeking a competitive edge, such as the Giants and the Philadelphia Flyers. He's a keynote speaker for people like Facebook and McDonald's and many, many others, and a profound human that has been in this space for many, many years. Dr. Nate Zinsser, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure to be with you, James. Pleasure to have this opportunity to meet and greet and interact with your listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to dive into the topic of confidence in itself. Of what do you define as confidence, and why is confidence so important in the grand scheme of life?
Well, my definition, which differs a little bit from what you might find in a dictionary, really looks at automaticity and instinctiveness and unconscious competence. My definition of confidence is that sense of certainty that you might have about an ability, a skill, or a knowledge area that allows you to perform that skill or to interact in that knowledge area more or less unconsciously. You are so certain that you know something or that you can do something that you simply look at it and do it without a whole lot of repetitive discursive thought. How do I do this? Am I doing this right? Etc., etc. A sense of certainty about your ability that allows you to act more or less unconsciously. That's my definition. And it's important because if we are performing something, whether it's a tennis serve or whether it's a speech or whether it's a negotiation, and we are second guessing ourselves, talking to ourselves, reflecting on ourselves as we are doing this, then we're not fully connected to the moment. And we miss some opportunities. We don't fully express ourselves, whether this is a physical performance or a musician on the stage, an entrepreneur in consultation, a salesman in negotiation, a mom interacting with her kid. We don't bring ourselves fully to the moment because we're in the process of thinking about it, processing it, reflecting it, analyzing, judging, criticizing. All these things slow down our true abilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's an important distinction between confidence and competence, because competence is the ability to do something, and then confidence is the ability to actually show up in a way to be able to do something, right? Because I mean, we can get in our own way if we don't have the confidence to show up. And for someone that maybe doesn't see themselves as a confident person, how does someone become confident?
You have to change the way you think about your various skills and abilities. You make a very important point that many people have X degree of competence in something, but their confidence in themselves relative to that same skill or knowledge is considerably less. Henceforth, we never see how good they are. Okay? You may have the ability to lift 200 pounds off the floor. But if you're not completely convinced that you're going to get that 200 pounds off the floor, well, we won't see it. It won't happen. That's a very simplistic explanation, but you can think about how that pans out, how that manifests itself in all kinds of human endeavors. Okay, do you really know how to solve those algebra problems or trigonometry problems or biochemistry problems? Can you reproduce those in class in your study group, but then you freeze up in the exam room? God, I thought I knew this. Oh, but I got so nervous. I got so worried I'm so concerned about my grade then the urgency to perform actually overwhelms and interferes with the performance that you're capable of. So in order to bridge that gap, sure, you have to do the practice, you have to maintain your competence, but it's really important that at each step of the way, as you are building up your competence, you're reflecting and you're reminding yourself, yes, I understand this process. Yes, I understand this sequence of events. Yes, I understand this about my prospective customer. Yes, I know how to place the tennis ball in that corner of the service court. I've done it a bunch of times in practice. We live in such a perfectionistic oriented world
Mhm.
that many times we don't allow ourselves to have that sense of, hey, I think I know how to do this. It's, oh, I got to practice more. I got to make sure I can do it perfectly all the time. And so we never allow ourselves to feel that sense of certainty. So building confidence is a matter of having a very thoroughly constructive thought process about our past, about our present, what we say to ourselves about ourselves in the present, and what we think about the future. And all of those things are under our personal control. It takes some discipline, it takes some practice, but it is possible for anybody to gain confidence in any particular area of their lives. That's the good news.
Yeah, it's a learned habit, and it is something that we, like you said, we have control over. And I think a lot of people go through life seeing it as an identity that they take on, and that's the rest of their life. That I am an unconfident person, or I'm a confident person, and that's going to be the direction of my life. Which, as we know, that's just not how that works. And I think for me, a few years ago, the big awakening for me was recognizing that there was a story that I was telling myself that wasn't serving me, and
Yeah.
that story is built up of past experiences and conclusions and assumptions that I've come to that have created this idea of myself that makes me believe that I should be confident or I shouldn't be confident. You talk about having a memory bank and diving into that. And I think that that's very important because we have to choose to have that to be able to be confident in where we are now. So, my question to you is, how can we be more selective of the memories that we choose to take from our past?
Um, it's a very simple process, actually. You know, open up open up your memory, ladies and gentlemen. Go back to a memory related to your job or your sport or your passion, whatever it is that you are looking to become more confident in. Go back into your past and find an initial experience that brought a sense of accomplishment and peace of mind. Maybe it was that first time you made good contact with the ball, or the first time you hit that foul shot, or the first time you had that satisfying um, feedback from a teacher or a professor. Go back to that, write that moment down, and then continue to look at other moments that produce a similar feeling. Um, the exercise that I prescribe to a lot of people is what I refer to as the top 10. What are your top 10 moments with respect to your profession? Write those out. Put those on a big poster, maybe next to an inspirational photograph or a symbol or a landscape, just something that gives you a sense of, yeah, that's good. We all have those moments. If you look for them, you'll find them. If you don't look for them, they could be right under your nose, but you won't see them. Go back into your memory bank, into that movie, run the movie of your life backward, and look for those moments of, significant success. That's the starting point. Those key moments. Maybe you've got 10 of them. Maybe you've got 8 of them. Maybe you've got 5 of them. Those are your initial deposits in what I refer to as a mental bank account, a collection of thoughts that helps you feel certain about yourself. Look for those initial ones, and then day by day, reflect on your day by day experience. And anything that you've experienced over the course of the day that produces a sense of energy or optimism, well, put that in a journal. Put that in some kind of concrete recording. Every one of those is, again, another deposit into the bank account. And it's the consistent accumulation of these memories that produces a heck of a lot of certainty. This is the evidence that you actually have uncovered for yourself that supports you being certain, that supports you being confident in the upcoming moments. So that's where we start.
Yeah. And it's really important to think about that in that way, because again, it goes back to the story that we're telling ourselves. If we're not thinking about all those times, if we're not able to actually identify it, well, then our mind automatically goes to look at the negative of what we haven't done, or of how far we have to go, and comparing ourselves off of that, right? And for you, you've worked with a lot of really high level people. You know, Eli Manning being one of them. Before he went to the Super Bowl, he didn't have concrete proof that it was possible that he could do it, right? So in that moment, what are you telling him? What are you telling someone that hasn't done it yet, that doesn't have the proof?
Well, I'm telling them to look back into their past to see anything that might contribute toward
Mm,
the ability to do something that they haven't done yet.
yeah.
I'm also telling them to use their imagination and create a scenario in that wonderful video studio between your ears.
Yeah.
How about you think about what you want? What might it be like to win a Super Bowl, win the US Open Tennis Championship, win a World Series, step onto the stage at Carnegie Hall, deliver a knockout performance, and have the entire audience rise to their feet? How about some imagination? We all have an imagination. Some of us waste our imagination with worry. Oh, this could go wrong. Well, what about this? Oh, I'm scared about that. That's a waste of imagination. You can just as easily use that imagination to think, yeah, I can score that point. I can make that pitch. I can make that save. I can make that touchdown pass. Here's how we might be able to do it. And so you give yourself permission now as an adult to have the same kind of wide open imagination that you had when you were 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, before schooling drummed it all out of you.
So
That's
important.
that's how you do. That's how you create an experience for yourself that you actually have not yet done in your physical body, because your nervous system doesn't know the difference between something that you have actually experienced in the physical realm
Yep.
and something that you vividly imagine. This is why nightmares are so interesting.
Mm,
Your body reacts as if you're actually scared. Heart pounds, muscles tighten, throat constricts, but you're safe in your bed. But your nervous system doesn't know the difference between that imagined frightening episode in your nightmare and an actual frightening episode. And it treats the body the same way. You get to create that. So your nervous system now understands what it feels like to step into the Super Bowl stadium or the World Series or Carnegie Hall, or that conference room where you're delivering your sales pitch to a room full of, potentially skeptical customers.
very true. Very true. I always say that, like you said, your nervous system doesn't know the difference between what is real and what is imagined. And so, if you can picture something so vividly in your mind, and you do that over and over again, and you take the action to make it happen, it's inevitable at the end of the day. And I think the hurdle that I think for a lot of people is they don't have the clarity on what that would look like, right? Like
Ah,
they don't have a Super Bowl to picture. They don't have a tangible thing to look towards to say, I'm going to picture this and this is going to be the direction that I want to go in. So for someone that can't get clear in that picture, they're trying to visualize, but they just can't put it into, they can't just picture it. How have you helped people get through that?
well, back down the process to something more immediate. Okay, what's the workout that you might do tomorrow?
Hmm.
What's on your to-do list for today? What's on your schedule for this week? Oh, yeah, I've got this meeting with so and so. Okay, where's that going to take place? Can I picture the surroundings? What's that building? What's that room? What I walk people through these kinds of scenarios all the time. Tell me about the lighting. Tell me about the furniture. Tell me about where the windows are. Who's going to be seated where? Okay, now see what you will see when you get there. Now give it sound. You can see people. What do you hear them saying? What do you hear yourself saying? See what you're going to see, hear what you might hear, and feel. Feel what you might feel. The clothing you'll be wearing, your body seated or your body standing, your feet on the floor, the podium that you might rest your notes on. You can practice adding in all of these different sensory details. Visual details, auditory details, kinesthetic feeling details, and you can help your nervous system generate and understand a perspective that is quite likely to be true. And in so doing, you kind of fool your nervous system into thinking that you've already done this, which means when you actually get there, there'll still be some excitement. You still may have some butterflies, but you'll also have a sense of, okay, I've kind of been here. I've kind of been here before. I'm kind of ready for this. So if we can't imagine a Super Bowl
Yeah.
or winning the Nobel Prize or something really big, oh, ladies and gentlemen, we can do it for the smaller stuff, the stuff that's coming up this week. Take a look at your schedule. Take a look at your to-do list. Get your imagination working on some of that. You'll find that it's kind of fun.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And it's why meditation in the morning has become a habit for me, because that's the time where I need to do it every single day. That's the breakdown of making that a habit to do so, because not only does it make it more familiar for you, but it also allows you to have less resistance towards going towards it. Right? Like when you feel as though you've already achieved it in your body, well, then mentally it doesn't seem like such a difficult thing to believe that it's possible, right? And
Absolutely.
and for you, I know that you say that one thing is confidence isn't all encompassing. And I think that that's really important to recognize, because again, what I said earlier is we see confidence as like or a lot of people see confidence as a stagnant thing. Like it is either you are confident or you're not confident. So why is confidence not all encompassing?
Because it is very, very situation specific. You can, I'm sure everybody listening to this podcast could rattle off two or three things, two or three situations where they're ridiculously confident.
Hmm.
Oh, yeah, I'm really good at that. I do that all the time. And they can rattle off a couple things that scares the bejesus out of them. All right. The common misconception is that a confident individual is a confident individual across the board,
Yeah.
but nothing could be further from the actual truth. Everybody has their strong points regarding confidence, everybody has their weak points. The good news is that you can develop confidence in any particular aspect of your life that you so choose. Okay? I mean, even looking at, say, a particular sport, because I work with a lot of athletes,
Sure.
um, a basketball player might be very, very confident about her ability to dribble the ball, handle the ball, distribute the ball, but have a much lower sense of certainty about her ability to play defense.
Hmm.
And if you're going to be a good basketball player, you got to have all of that.
Yeah.
So it's important to be honest. Okay, what do I feel very comfortable doing? What do I feel very certain doing? What parts of my game do I not feel certain in? Well, let's make sure that we're practicing in those areas. And doubly important, let's make sure that every time we do practice and achieve just a little bit of improvement, we sort of lock that progress, that small victory, into our long-term memory, as opposed to just glossing it over and discounting it and saying, yeah, it's okay, but it's really not good enough yet, which is just another way of second guessing and doubting yourself.
Yeah. which is a habit every one of us has, right? We're always thinking of the next level of ourselves, the next thing that we can do, the next task that we have to go after. And I don't like to use the word balance, but I think it's the best way I can explain it now is how do we find the balance between, stepping into our next version of ourselves and wanting to have a high standard for ourselves while also allowing ourselves to be grateful for how far we have come?
Well, my answer to that question regards timing.
Mm,
If we are in preparation for something, if we are working out toward an upcoming contest, or we are studying for an exam, or we are preparing for a meeting, it's okay to have a little of that perfectionism.
mm,
I need to work. I need to learn this. I've got to be honest about what I do know and what I don't know. That can be done prior to stepping into the arena.
yeah.
When you step into the arena, the basketball court, the tennis court, the stage, whatever your performance arena is, at that point, that's when you got to be confident to the point of cocky.
Hmm.
I know what I know, and whatever I know is good enough for now. I can't walk into that room thinking, boy, I wish I had studied more about chapter 7. I hope he doesn't ask a whole lot about chapter 7 because that's the one I didn't really get. You got to be walking into that test room saying, okay, come on, test. Do your worst. I'm ready for you. I'm gonna do great on this test. I know what I know, and whatever I know is enough. That the balance is in the moment. You got to be a graceful, prancing, confident racehorse.
Hmm.
To prepare for that moment, you can be a more careful, analytical workhorse. Just make sure you don't confuse the two. If you're a racehorse during preparation, you might not work hard enough. If you're a workhorse during the performance, oh, you're going to be going slow and you're going to be second guessing yourself all the way. Bad, bad news in both directions.
Yeah. I love the examples that you use because those two are really, really, really important to take into perspective too, right? And one of the myths that you say is right is the belief that confidence is all encompassing. Is there any other beliefs that we have about confidence that are not true? Any
Well,
come
I
to mind?
think that probably the biggest one is that confidence is some sort of genetic disposition, and you're born with a whole lot of it,
Yeah.
or you're not. Um, that is dangerous.
Yeah.
There is a little bit of evidence um, that a, a tendency for optimism. There's a little bit of that does follow genetic
Sure.
distributions, but the truth of the matter is that confidence is just a skill that you cultivate, you develop it the same way you would develop um, the skill to solve a quadratic equation or conjugate a verb in Spanish or uh, hit a topspin forehand. You practice it. And if you practice it, you get better at it. Um, the misconception is that, oh, I just don't have any, there's nothing I can do about it. No, ladies and gentlemen, that's not the case. If you're thinking that way, well, then you're just giving yourself an easy out.
Yeah.
I suggest you refuse to do that and say, okay, what do I got to do to cultivate this confidence? What are the drills that I need to practice in order to develop this skill?
Yeah. It definitely is a skill. I always say that I feel like I've lived two lives, and the second one started when I stepped into the a new self story is what I would like to say. Like because I went through my entire life seeing myself as an unconfident person, and as soon as I recognized that that was just a belief, it wasn't my reality. Things started to change because I started to take different action, right? And as you said earlier, we have to visualize so that it becomes almost normal, but it allows us to actually move forward with our nervous system without so much resistance. How much would you say is it visualization and mental, and how much would you say it comes down to actually just taking the action and creating proof?
Um, I wish I could give you a nice
Yeah.
logical breakdown. Um, I can't. All I can say is that it is a mixture of those two things.
Mm.
Um, unless you are ridiculously talented, you're going to have to practice. Even the most talented people, and I'm thinking about people, say, in the National Football League that are, let's face it, genetic freaks,
Yeah.
they will not rise above the level of the other genetic freaks on the other teams unless they are diligent in working their particular skills, their speed, their agility, their various technical skills. Um, so it is a mixture of competence and confidence. And if you're going to be great at your chosen sport, art, craft, passion, you're going to have to cultivate both. I do find that in our world, we've done a pretty good job at articulating how to develop competence.
Mm.
Yeah, you can go to school in just about anything you want. You can go to a sports academy and learn how to be a tennis player, soccer player, baseball player, whatever, and they'll teach you the physical and technical and the tactical aspects of that sport. Some of them are just beginning to get into teach the mental, emotional components of success at that sport. But by and large, most of them don't. So cultivating the competence in any given art or sport or profession um, is simpler, more readily available. But in order to really express what you have, as we've been talking all along, you're going to have confidence to match. And so it's important that you find a way to cultivate and build that as well.
Yeah, very true. And I understand completely because it's hard to put both of those and say which one has more of a power, but it's just the importance of both of them is what's the intention behind it. There's a way that I think people live that I'd love to hear your perspective on. I think some people are playing to win, and then other people are playing not to lose. And
Mm-hmm.
in life, we have a predisposition usually to think a lot smaller. Our problem is usually that we think too small and not big enough. And I guess my question is, how can people at the end of the day, it's a choice, right? But how can we choose to think bigger, if that makes sense?
Um, I would say that's a personal decision that each of us makes.
Yeah.
We make the decision to think about what we want, how we want to perform,
Mhm.
what we want to accomplish tomorrow, how we wish to be in a given competitive or performance situation. We either think about how we want it to be, or we think about what might go wrong, what other people might say to us, think about us, talk about us if we are not great in that performance. We can think about what we want, but we can think about what could go wrong, why that would be hurtful, and that just takes you down a rabbit hole. So, you know, this is really a very simple decision to make. I'll be honest, sometimes it's a very difficult decision to make given our past histories, given the kind of cultural pressure that we all are subject to in this world of, you know, making sure you've done all your homework and making sure that you've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's, and don't dare call attention to yourself, or don't you dare think that you are really good until you have accomplished a heck of a lot.
Yeah.
We live in that society, and that makes it difficult, very difficult at times, to make the decision. This is how I want to be. This is how I want to perform. This is how I want to step up to the plate, step up to the microphone, sit down with my boss. This is the way I want to articulate. Let's think about that. Let's imagine that happening. Let's give our nervous system basically some repetitions in that desired outcome. Let's do that. It's an easy decision to make. Some of the time, it's a really hard decision to make some of the time, but it is a simple decision nonetheless. Um, And I'll go so far as to say that about 80% of my work, James, is just encouraging people to make that decision, to make that choice.
Yeah. I've found in, and that's why I asked that question, because I think for most things in life, it's simple, it's not easy. It's a simple decision, but it doesn't make it easy to do, because at the end of the day, we have our programmed idea of ourselves and the way that life is supposed to work, and other
Hmm.
people confirming those beliefs based on their own limits and perceptions that they've placed on the world, that try to reinforce it and reinforce it and reinforce it. And it's a tough thing to do unless we have people like you challenging people to think bigger. And I say, even from clients that I've worked with, the thing that I think is really important to recognize is that sometimes we need people to believe in us more than we believe in ourselves, just
Yeah,
so that we can see it's possible.
I couldn't agree with you more. Sometimes we need an outside perspective. I am constantly challenging the underlying beliefs that people have,
Hmm.
which prevent them from thinking about what they want,
Yeah.
which prevent them from creating a personal narrative that actually serves them, as opposed to a personal narrative that tightens things up and gets them, okay, I'm going to be careful here. I'm not going to go too aggressively because I don't want to be hurt. I don't want to fail and be hurt,
Mhm.
or I don't want to risk, uh, anything. We suffer from personal narratives, and I have to question, where does that come from? Who did you learn that from? Was that person that you might have learned that from really an outstanding performer in his or her life? Was that person really happy? Do you want to turn out like that person? Uh, I have to challenge a lot of people to look honestly at themselves, Um, and I go so far as to say that, most really, really successful people in any walk of life, um, they're pretty darn honest about themselves. They're pretty darn honest about how they got to be where they are. They don't suffer from too many of these um, self-limiting narratives. There's some exceptions to that, of course, but generally speaking, it's real honesty that leads to this kind of routinely and consistently constructive thinking.
Hmm. There's been a mindset that I've been entertaining these past few months, and it's this idea of choosing beliefs that are useful for me. Maybe they're not true, but they're useful.
But they're useful, yeah.
Do you believe that that's a good mindset to take on? Is useful
Oh,
not true?
oh, 100%. One of my favorite phrases is functional delusion.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, functional delusion. A a narrative that isn't necessarily true at the moment. I may kind of be lying to myself, but in the process of lying to myself, I'm energizing myself. I'm taking action forward so that delusion is actually functional and helpful. Now, you can delude yourself in some non helpful ways. Yes, I can sprout wings and fly, and I'm going to jump off a 20-story building. No, that is a rather dysfunctional delusion.
Mhm.
But the delusion that, I run a 2 hour and 35-minute marathon, for an experienced marathoner, okay, that might be a very, very functional delusion. If Because when you think that way and you reinforce that, it encourages you to actually take the actions. It sets up what they call in psychology talk a little cognitive dissonance.
Mhm.
There's this disconnection, and you work to connect that disconnection, to fill that void. And if it's constructively done, if it's functional delusion, well, then that gap, taking the actions to fill that gap, man, that moves you closer to what you want. So it's a constructive, valuable process.
It's affirming to hear. It's affirming to hear. Because it's something I've been entertaining a lot recently, is trying to choose beliefs that are useful for me. Maybe they're not true in the moment, but believing that they're useful is eventually going to lead them to be eventually true, right? And um, for the work that you've done, you've worked with many different people in many different facets of multiple different fields, right? Like, what are some characteristics that you see within those that are the most confident compared to those that usually live with more self-limiting beliefs?
Well, as I mentioned before, I think it starts with honesty.
For sure.
Okay. The people that I've worked with that have really made great strides, they are absolutely honest with themselves about how they think, and they're honest to themselves about the relationship between their thought process, how that affects their emotional state, and how that affects their performance. They're not kidding themselves.
Yeah.
Okay. They're honest about how they think. And then they are curious. Oh, how can I change? All right. I'm honest enough to know that what I'm doing in this situation is very helpful. I'm honest enough to realize that what I'm doing in this situation is very unhelpful. Okay. How can I change? They're curious. And then once they get some guidance, once they get some training principles,
Mhm.
they're really, really disciplined to follow those few rules. They do the work to look at their quality effort, their tiny successes, their slow but steady progress every day. And they're willing to do that over weeks and months and months and years. So it's curiosity, it's honesty, it's discipline. Those are three characteristics that I have found pretty common across the board for the people that I've worked with who've had great success.
Yeah. The daily ESP, I love it.
That's a daily step that is so simple, takes about 5 minutes,
Yep.
but it yields ridiculously powerful dividends. Just looking at your day, where did I put in quality effort? What little successes did I achieve? And when I say little, they can be really small. Yeah. Um, I got my kid to play nicely with so and so for 10 minutes. That's a success, you know? And then what am I making progress in? What aspects of my game, what aspects of my career, my profession am I getting better at? Uh, I've I have saved photographs of pages of people's journals, you know, uh, because that diligent process, as I say, yields huge dividends. You know, if you want to cultivate a sense of certainty about yourself, look for the evidence of it in your own life, day by day by day.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that I've done recently, or I've really been doing for a good probably a year now, is instead of writing my notes or the tasks that I have to do throughout my day, I'll write a big old like the wins at the top of my paper, and then every single thing that I do, I write a check mark right next to it because every single thing that I do is a win. I'm saying I'm going to do something, I do it, and it's another reinforcing belief that I should be
Mm-hmm.
confident because I'm doing what I said I would do. I think for a lot of people that maybe they're in a pursuit that isn't so linear. And I say that they're in a phase of life where the progress seems invisible. How do you help someone stay confident in a time where maybe the results don't feel like they're showing up?
Yeah. Um, it's important to sort of peel back the layers,
Hmm.
you know, depending on the profession or uh, job that you're in, you don't see the results immediately. Um, but can you look at yourself and say, yep, at least I put in quality effort here. I made a, I made an effort toward an eventual success. Um, one of my clients, he's a CEO, and he started off with the ESP process, effort, success, progress,
Hmm.
but he personalized it. He said, I'm really going to look at my effort, and my effort is going to contribute towards progress in some areas.
Hmm.
And eventually that progress is going to culminate in success. So he changed ESP to EPS, which made sense to him because he's a CEO and EPS also stands for earnings per share. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Um, that, that's the way you look at it. I mean, you have to be, everybody can put in quality effort. The actual success, the actual outcome may be weeks, months, in some cases, years in the future. But are you putting in effort? Is it moving the needle a little bit toward that desired outcome? That's one way you can tweak the process.
Yeah, it's the standards at the end of the day, right? Like I've defined my idea of success as my standards. If I'm doing what I said I would do, I am succeeding because I can't control the external. I can only control what I take action on, what I do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would how do we, especially since you've worked with a lot of people in fields that are sports, say for example, I find that for a lot of people, they identify their self-worth with the results that they get on the field or on the court. How
Right.
have you helped people almost detach from that?
I explained to them that despite all the effort that they're going to put in order to win a game or win a tournament or win a championship, ultimately they don't control whether they win. A lot of people don't want to hear that,
Yeah.
but it's the facts, Jack. Uh,
True.
you don't control winning, okay? You don't control winning. There's lots of factors that influence the outcome of a game or a life that you don't control. Okay. We say in the Army, the enemy has a vote too. Okay. There's an opponent. Typically, your opponent wants to win too. You don't control your opponent.
Mhm.
You can influence your opponent's actions in some sports, you know. In tennis, I don't really influence my opponent's action the way I might say in wrestling or boxing.
Yeah.
Okay. But ultimately, I don't control the level of ability, the level of effort that my opponent is bringing in. Nor do I control the decision by referees, nor do I control the weather, nor do I control weird bounces of the ball and just strange random occurrences. There's a whole lot that goes into winning that I don't control, and I got to understand that. I can't take pride just in the win. I've got to take pride. I've got to really focus on the things that I can control, the quality of my attention in the moment, the effort that I bring to each point, match, down, situation, and my attitude throughout the contest.
Mhm.
I control whether I get frustrated if I make a mistake. I control if I get frustrated if my opponent makes a marvelously great play. Good for her, you know? Or, oh, I hate that she did that. I mean, you're in control of that. You control your effort, you control your focus, you control your attitude. That's what you should be proud of at the end of any competition. It's nice to win. Oh, I get it. Yeah, winning is great.
Yeah.
I'm all for it. Uh, but it's very important that you, as a competitor, do not control the outcome. And this is triply important if you're part of a team. If you're in a team sport or in a team um, business organization, the outcome ultimately is a function of everybody, and you don't control everybody. You got to make daggone sure, though, that you're bringing your best version, yourself, your quality effort, your quality focus, your quality attitude to the team situation. That makes it triply, quadruply complicated. So everybody's got to know that going in.
Yeah. One person that is one of the winningest hitters of all time was Tony Gwynn. What principles or what takeaways did you take away from him?
Well, I remember coming across a Sports Illustrated article about Tony Gwynn toward the end of his career, and he was one of the best hitters in baseball
Yep.
during the years that he played for the San Diego Padres. Um, and he did what I thought made a hell of a lot of sense, and I've shared it with a lot of other people. That he was honest to look at his performances on video. Okay. But then he would filter them, so to speak. He would create video cataloging of the pitches where he made good contact with the ball, the successes. He made another video log of the pitches where he made a good decision about a pitch, whether to swing for it or whether to hold off it because it wasn't a pitch worth swinging for. And he made another video log of the pitches that he shouldn't have swung at, but did, which he immediately threw away.
Way. Yeah.
He immediately threw that away. But he would go back to the other two, you know? And the quote from that article that I still remember so clearly is he throws away the video collection of the bad pitches, the bad decisions, because the last thing he wants to do is watch himself looking like a fool swinging at somebody's curveball. There's no value in replaying that mistake.
Mm-hmm.
He identifies it, he throws it away. And he spends his time looking at, where did I make a good decision? I'm going to face that pitcher again in a month, in 2 months. I might be facing that pitcher in the playoffs or the World Series. I want to learn what I did well against that guy. I want to remind myself of that. That's how great hitters stay on top of their game.
Mm. So when it comes to making improvements, isn't there another side of this where you have to look at where you did wrong so that you can figure out how not to do that next time? Or would you say it's intensely important to focus on what you did do right so that that reinforces in the future?
I think it is intensely important to focus on what you want more of. And it's pretty clear, it's pretty obvious to most of us what we got to change,
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you have a coach or a boss.
Sure.
Coach is going to say, we need to get better at this. You don't need to beat yourself up over that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the coach gets paid for. All right. I urge people to have basically a 4-to-1 ratio of successes, positive steps, little wins, 4 to maybe 1, oh, I should have gotten this right. You can have an awareness of your shortcomings. You can work on addressing those shortcomings. But you want to spend the vast majority, 80% of your emotional energy reinforcing, I'm getting this right. I'm getting better at this. I did this well. I can expect more of that. That in the long run is going to help you out. Unfortunately, we grow up in a world where, yeah, okay, you got that one right, but you did this wrong, and you did this wrong, and you did this wrong. And, so many of the people that I talk to can remember conversations in the car coming home from a Little League game, and mom or dad, even though they have good intentions,
Yep.
are just reminding their young son or daughter at the time of, well, I like the way you did this, but we really got to fix this. There's such a greater degree of emotional content behind the mistakes, the setbacks, the parts of his or her game that need to be addressed. It's almost like the good stuff is the good stuff, but who cares about it?
Yeah.
The bad stuff, that's what we get serious about. What that does is just create the habit in the young man or the young woman to carry around the wrong stuff. And sometimes they've been carrying it for years and years and years. That's the bad news. Good news, they can change. Free will, we've got it. We can exercise it. And I have seen so many people change for the better over relatively short periods of time. In the course of a single season, in the course of a single semester, they've really changed the way they think about themselves. So there's plenty to look forward to for all of us.
Yeah. I think you're right. The way that the school system and just the way that we're grown up, we attach ourselves to we can pick out 2 to 3 things that we did wrong throughout our life and not and neglect 100% of the things that we did right, and it becomes a part of who we are or who we see ourselves as and the way that we live our lives. How can we get in the habit of making the positive and the upside the prominent part of our life, because we have a negative bias to go towards the things that we can improve, or the threat that's in the bushes, or all the things that's going wrong.
No, you just got to start slowly and steadily looking for the best in yourself. You know, go back to the big moments in your life that support your certainty. Look for the smaller things day by day. Okay. You can even look for one tiny little constructive moment in each meeting or drill or encounter that you have throughout the day. A gradual process of shifting your attention and shifting your emotional connection to the highs of the day versus the lows of the day. Um, it can be a slow process, um, but it absolutely can work for anybody. I've yet to see it fail.
That's affirming to hear. That's affirming to hear for a lot of people out there. I know that. What I know, affirmations is something that's big that helps us lead into that positive mindset when we automatically we're going through most of our life unconsciously in the negative. That's the bias that we have. What role does affirmations have in helping us become a more
Well,
confident person?
an affirmation is basically any statement that you make to yourself about yourself.
Hmm.
You are saying yes, affirming to something. Okay. You are saying yes to, I'm not a very good cook. You're saying yes to, oh, I'm a great Latin dancer. You're saying yes to, uh, I don't know very much about taking care of my lawn. You're saying yes to, uh, I am great reading the way putting greens break. Okay. You're saying yes to something. My only question is, what are you saying yes to? What indeed are you affirming to? What story are you telling yourself about yourself? And is that story consistent with, in alignment with, what you actually want to accomplish in your job, in your sport, in your life? Take your pick, you know. If if you tell yourself, yeah, I always fall apart in in the final innings of a game. Don't be surprised if that's exactly what happens. If you want to stay consistent, if you want to actually get better as a game goes on, you better start telling yourself that kind of story, even if you're not doing it at the moment. I play my best baseball in the late innings of a game. If that's what you want, well, then affirm it. Say yes to it. Construct a statement, first person, present tense, affirmative language. Dress it up with whatever descriptive language you like. That's the story you need to be telling yourself. If that is the performance, if that is the level of performance that you desire to experience in your life. We are all walking around with all kinds of beliefs and opinions about ourselves. Everything from how we look to how we run, how we walk, how we lift, how we throw, how we think, you name it, you name it, you name it. We are just a great big bundle of self-fulfilling prophecies. The only question is, are they constructive in terms of what we actually want when we step back and exercise a little honesty? Am I thinking about myself? Am I thinking about my team in a way that is consistent with what I want to perform, with the way I want my team to perform? If there's a disconnect between what I want and the way I think about it in the moment, okay, that's what we've got to address. If those two things aren't really well aligned, really synchronous, really harmonious, then we're kind of asking for trouble in this imperfect, difficult world that we all inhabit. Let's close that gap. Let's think about how we want to be, and let's say yes to it. Let's affirm it. I am at my best in the later innings. I easily communicate the vision to my team day after day. I step into every meeting with an open mind and a full heart. You can express it any way you want.
Yeah.
But this is where the honesty comes in, James.
It's very important. It's very important. And we think more so in the sense of how we've always seen ourselves as rather than how we want to see ourselves. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful that you brought that distinction in. I have two questions for you. One is a little bit selfish, and it might be a little bit selfish for the audience too. Is you, like I said, you've been in this space for a long time and you've done so much work in it. What's something that you spent a lot of time on that I should skip entirely?
Something that I've spent a lot of time on that you don't need to talk about? Ah, wow. That's an interesting question. I don't think I've ever been asked that particular one.
That's what I like to hear.
Um, um, well, I think you've done a heck of a good job covering some of the major misconceptions about confidence. We don't
Yeah.
have to ask. We don't need to ask about any of those anymore. What's your second one?
Yeah. This is the last question I ask every guest, and this might be one that you haven't been asked either. My question to you, well, to give an overview, is the reason I made this podcast is we have a lot of beliefs about the world and about ourselves that don't serve us. And so my purpose with this podcast is to help people unlearn the beliefs about themselves that hold them back. So my question to you is, what belief are you currently unlearning?
What I am currently unlearning is my own, still to this day, lingering occasional sense that what I know and how I communicate it, what I know and how I communicate what I know is only of interest to a relatively small segment of the population.
Mhm.
Okay. I am continually in the process of learning how vast the application really is for what I know and how I communicate it. Okay. I was lying to myself for a long time. Yeah, everybody already knows what I know. It's not that big a deal. It's not gonna, I don't think it's gonna be all that important. And then I got a lot of encouragement to write my book.
Yeah.
And then that just started snowballing, you know? Uh, and so I am in the process of continuously reaching out, continuously accepting uh, requests for consultations and presentations from an ever widening audience. Uh, the world is a very vast place. Confidence is such a crucial element in human performance that the applications of what I know and how I communicate it are vast, vast, vast indeed.
Very true.
Good question. I like it.
I appreciate it. I like to ask that question because even you, like you've been in this space for a long time, people think that you have it all figured out. People think most of the people that I speak with have it figured out in some respect. And knowing that we're always unlearning something, it's funny because I find that for most people, they'll write a book about a problem that they're currently dealing with or they're still going to always go through, or they do something in some facet of life that they once struggled with. And so it's really affirming to hear that kind of stuff, and I appreciate you immensely for your time. All of your links and everything will of course be in the show notes, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for the opportunity, and my best to you and my best to all your listeners.
Thank you.
Practice hard and play loud.